Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of His eye. Let's get to work. So here are some scriptures, again, primarily from the prophets, talking about Esau, Edom. In Amos chapter 1, verses 10 through 12, it says, "But I will send a fire upon Teman, which shall devour Basra." And if you remember, both those names are the offspring of Edom, or Esau. In Isaiah 63, verses 1 through 6, the scriptures say, "Who is this that comes from Edom with dyed garments from Basra?" And then it goes on to say, "Traveling in the greatness of his strength, for the day of vengeance is in my heart." Jeremiah chapter 48, verses 7 through 22. This is just a brief excerpt from it. "Concerning Edom, for I will bring the calamity of Esau upon him, the time that I will visit him. He shall not be able to hide himself." And just a note. Now this was written in the prophets, and again, prophecy is talking about things in the larger picture from the mind of the Most High. He knew that Edom was going to do what Edom did. One of the things that Edom has done is hide himself among other people groups. So Edom has been hiding himself under another identity for several centuries. Actually, more than several centuries, because we were just talking about during the time that the Messiah was operating, nearly all of those players were Edomites. There were very few people from the bloodline Yehudi involved in that story. So when the scriptures talk about the Jews, they're talking about the Judeans. So that's Edom. All right. And so he's been hiding ever since. Some people say that the Edomites vanished into history. No, they did not. They're here right now. And so that's why the Most High is saying, he shall not be able to hide himself. This is probably a good time for me to mention again, one of the themes that the Most High has given those of his teachers and those who are advancing to the best of our ability his word. He gives certain themes for the years. One of the themes was people are going to have to declare who they are. In other words, in these days, there won't be any groups hiding any longer. They're going to have to come out from hiding. If you belong to the Most High and you've been hiding, you're going to have to come out. If you belong to the seed of the serpent and you've been hiding among the Most High's people, you're going to have to come out. The Apostle John said that in Revelation. Okay, and so that is what is going on right now. So just a couple of other things. Again, going back to the encyclopedia, the Jewish encyclopedia, it says once again, Edom is modern Jewry. It's in the documents. That's the New Standard Jewish Encyclopedia from the 1977 version. So, and then finally in the Antiquities of the Jews, written by Josephus, one of the scholars from that era, it says the Jews are a people, listen to this, distinct and separate from God's people, although living among them. This is not a new thing. This has been known it has been hidden, and now it is time for that which is hidden to be revealed. So as we move into the latter times, better known as the last days, and as a reminder, the last days did begin. The beginning of the last days was when after Yeshua had been resurrected from the dead. So we've been in the last days for a while now, and lots of things have happened. But one of the things that has happened is that the people who lived in the Judea area after 70 A.D. were scattered. Those people called the Jews were scattered, those who had not been killed. Okay? So in Malachi 1:4, where we talked about this a little bit ago, but this is Edom talking. But the rebuilding and of what has been torn down, was what they had built up, taking the place of the bloodline children of Yasharel. And so that's where Malachi 1:4 comes in. But the prophets have been talking about this, and so these last few verses are all talking about Edom and Esau, Edom. And so in Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 24, those that inhabit the waste of the land, and it says Abraham was one, but we are many. That's Edom talking. That this is one of the prophecies that Ezekiel was given about Edom. He was given another one about Edom in Ezekiel 35. It says, because you have said, these two nations shall be mine, and we will possess it. You shall be desolate, Mount Seir, and all Idumea. Mount Seir was the mountain that the Edomites took from the Horites, and Idumea is another word for Edom. Okay, so this is also a prophecy about the Edomites. And the two nations that are being referred to are the northern and the southern kingdoms of Yasharel. Then in Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 1 through 7, it says, the enemy has said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours. And that again is speaking about Idumea. And then in Obadiah verses 8 and 9, shall I not in that day destroy the wise men out of Edom? That's what the Most High is saying, is coming about as judgment. By the way, Obadiah is a writing that's specifically talking about Edom. Okay. In verse 13, it says, they laid hands on the substance of Jacob and Judah, but they shall be judged, and the kingdom shall be Yahuwah's. So the prophets have already spoken about the final state of the seed of Esau, Edom. That's why we're looking at this. This is how the seed of Esau, Edom is being tracked. And if you remember, this is part of the larger lesson on tracking the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. Esau, Edom represents the seed of the serpent. So as we continue our lesson tracking the seed of the serpent, and specifically the seed of Esau and Jacob, we left off with Hyrcanus, Johann Hyrcanus, of the Hasmonean dynasty, and how he forcibly made the Idumeans, or the Edomites, convert to Judaism. And from Judaism, that's where the Talmud comes in, all of those things, all right? Now, so we'll continue. in the Jewish Encyclopedia, it tells us that the Edomites were incorporated into the Jewish nation. That's in volume 5, page 41. In volume 6, page 376, that's when King David made Edom into a province of Israel. And so I don't know if you remember the map, you probably don't, of the land of Israel, but right underneath the land of Judah, which was the southern kingdom, is where you will find Edom and Idumea. Okay, so they were that close. They were right south of the land of the Judeans. Okay, now in Josephus, he comments that when it comes to the Jews, he also says that those Idumeans, the Edomites, became a part of the Jewish nation. So see, that's why people today are saying that they're Jews, because that's the history that we're looking at. The reason why we're talking about it, though, because we're tracking the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. One of the markings of the seed of the serpent always inserts himself into the affairs of the seed of the woman. And in this case, the seed of the woman helped that process. But the Most High still hates what the seed of the serpent is doing, if that makes sense. Okay. Now, so underneath Josephus, one of the areas that he mentions also is, if you remember, Jesus, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, it wasn't Jesus. It was John the Baptist had told Herod that he shouldn't be sleeping with his brother's sister. Okay. That's who Salome is. Okay, so Herod's sister Salome was a part of this as well. And in Josephus' Wars of the Jews, he mentions, we talked about this in the last session, 3 political sects of the Jews. One of them was the Pharisees, the other one was the Sadducees. Now, we didn't mention the Essenes, okay? The last of those 3, the Essenes, are actually bloodline children of the Yahudi, or Judah. They are bloodline children of Yasharel. It's the Essenes, they were the ones who were actually keeping the traditions that had been established by and for Yasharel. But they were only one of those 3 political sects. And eventually they just gave up on the land of Judea and moved completely out, which is why the scrolls were found around Qumran. Okay. But when it comes to the Idumeans again, which is the Edomites, they're often referred to as Syrians. So those who are leading Jerusalem after the exile. During Pilate's rule, the priests were from the families of Boethus, who was the first high priest that was a Babylonian, and that actually created this Hellenistic and Babylonian influence. They became the aristocratic ruling class in Judea. I'm going to read that again because this one, we kind of jumped out of order. So let's go back a little bit to understand how we got to when Yeshua was walking the earth, to the specific people who were either Idumeans or Edomites. Again, it says the priests during Pilate's rule, Pilate was ruling during the time of Yeshua, were from families of Botus. The first high priest was a Babylonian, and that created the Hellenistic and Babylonian influence over what we call Yasharel. They became the aristocrat ruling class in Judea, which means that the priest, because this is the high priest now, okay, and the high priest's families, they weren't from one of the 12 tribes during the time that Pilate was ruling. Herod's dynasty was Idumean to the core. Herod and his family were not bloodline children of Yehudi or Yasharel. They operated underneath the moniker of Jews because they lived in Judea, but they were not the people that the Most High said, I'm going to bless you. They're not the people who were the inheritors of the blessing that Isaac gave to Jacob. Therefore, they're not the inheritors of the blessing that was given to Abraham. So when the scriptures said to Abraham, or when the scriptures record the Most High saying to Abraham, those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. And he told the same thing to Isaac, and he told the same thing to Jacob. These are not those people. So they don't have that blessing. Therefore, people who come against them are not going to be the enemies of the Most High, because they are not the ones that blessing was for. This was when Yeshua was walking the earth. So remember, we talked about the Sanhedrin. Actually, there were 3 Sanhedrins. The Lesser Sanhedrin, those were the courts. They were 3-panel courts, and they dealt with money issues. Okay. And then there was another Sanhedrin that was comprised of 23 judges. They met in Jerusalem and in other parts, and they dealt with criminal cases, and they had the power to inflict the death penalty. And in some cases, the Sadducees were the ones that held the power there. And then the Great Sanhedrin was comprised of 71 members. That included the chief priest. It included the chamber of scribes. It included the chamber of elders and the ordained scholars. And those people served as judges. They could try the high priest, and they could make judgments against cities accused of idolatry, but they could not inflict the death penalty. This is important because the people that caused Yeshua to be killed, when he went before the Sanhedrin, he went before that 23-member court that dealt with criminal cases. So it was the larger group that told Pilate that the Romans had to kill him because they didn't have the power to kill him. The 23 judges Sanhedrin did, but they didn't do anything along those lines. So the point is, this was the group of people that judged Yeshua, sentenced him to death, and then assisted in the carrying out of his death. So when you hear people who walk underneath the banner of Jew saying that they didn't kill Yeshua, the Romans did, no, they killed him. And which is exactly what the scriptures say. So we can decide who we want to believe. The people who are making these claims, because they realize that most people don't know the intricacies of how their society has been configured. So with that as our background, we're able to see that there is a progression through Scripture of Esau, Edom. And now we're going to be looking at Esau, Edom as it relates to what we in modern times call the Jews. All right. And actually the scriptures start calling the Jews in what we know as primarily as the New Testament. They're mentioned the word Jew is mentioned when in Esther, because that was the name that was used to identify the people that Esther was to save by her being in that position as the queen of Persia. But overwhelmingly, when we get into the New Testament, we'll see that name come up again and again. So keep that in mind. Now, most of the political and religious leadership in Judea after the return to Jerusalem from the Babylonian captivity and moving up into the time of the Messiah, most of those people, most of those individuals, most of those family groups were not descendants of either of the tribes of Judah or Aaron's progeny from the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe, and that included groups that we know as the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, the civil courts, the Herodians. All of those groups that were just named were operating under the moniker of Jew. Now, we talked about this before. We talked about how Jew in that particular time had to do with the area, the geographical area that the tribe of Judah had been assigned when Moses divvied up the land, of the promised land. But there were people coming in and out of that land all the time. And by the time that the Messiah was walking, the inhabitants of Judea, the inhabitants of the territory of the tribe of Judah included many people groups. Okay, so and even in the sense of those who would be considered the offspring of Israel, those people were also included in Jew. And we'll come back to that. No, I'll go ahead and deal with it now. So what's being said is the word Jew is a word that describes a geographical area. It doesn't describe a bloodline. So that's why you can have people who are an intricate part of Judaism, but not be the bloodline children of Judah. Okay? So, having said that, that's where we get to the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, the civil courts, the Herodians. All of those people could be lumped into the category of Jew. I'll go ahead and give the example. In the United States of America, anybody who has skin color that goes from nearly Western European, northeastern and Western Europeans in terms of their skin color, all the way to the darkest skin color presents itself on the continent of Africa, and every gradation in between. If you live in the United States of America and you have one drop, this has not changed, y'all. If you have one drop of quote unquote Negro or black blood, you are black. So I have people in my family that look white, but they are black because they have a drop of Negro blood in them. I have people in my family who are extremely dark. They're considered black. And just as it's that way in my family, it's that way with everyone in the United States that has been identified as quote unquote black. All right. So black doesn't have anything to do with genetics, and it certainly doesn't have very much to do with bloodline. There were people on this continent who were as dark as me that were not on the African continent. They met the Pilgrims when the Pilgrims arrived on these shores. They, rather than being called Indians, were genocided on paper and included into the black category, only then they called it colored. So anyone that was called colored, usually what that meant was it was a person of native descent to this land who was lumped in with those who had been enslaved from across the water. So I'm spending a little time talking about that because that's very similar to what the situation is with Jews. Now, what does that mean practically? Practically, that means that I have been lumped in with people who are not my people. That's what that means. Now, some of my people are very light-skinned, but see, all of that has to do with how the rulers of this nation have decided to label and categorize people. It has nothing to do with actually who the people are. It had everything to do with this is the easiest way for us to keep our labor pool cheap so that we can make as much money off of these souls as possible. All right. So that's the example that I'm suggesting. That's why you can have in the land, you can have Pharisees, you can have the Sanhedrin, you can have the civil courts populated by people who are not bloodline relatives. They just happen to all live in the same place. And because they're underneath Roman jurisdiction, or because they were under Greek jurisdiction, or because they were under Babylonian jurisdiction, they all are operating under the same moniker of Jew, if that makes sense. Okay, so when Jerusalem came under siege in 70 AD and around that time, those who were leading the rebellion weren't primarily the bloodline tribe of Judah. They were Edomites. They were the children of Esau, because, well, we'll see it in the next slide coming. So many of the people who were driven out of Judea by the Romans, they went into Turkey. They went into the Russian steppes. They went into Western Europe. They went under the name of Jew, but they were actually Edomites. So as Edomites have done from antiquity, one of the characteristics of an Edomite is that they continually intermarry with other people who are worshiping other gods. That's what they do. And I'm talking again about, I'm not talking about every individual. I'm talking about that which made them an abomination to the Most High. Because the Most High told his people, don't do that. Don't intermarry with folks who worship other gods. He had a beef against Israel for that, because Israel was doing the same thing. But the Edomites, that was their mode of reproducing themselves. So they would reproduce with any and everybody. That's why as an Edomite, your skin color can be as diverse as the skin color of the so-called black people in the United States of America, if that makes sense. Okay. So that intermarrying with these other ethnic groups included the descendants of Ashkenaz, Sephardi, and the Khazars. You've heard these names mentioned before. All of those people groups were interspersed with Edomites. So for this session, we're going to stop here. I just wanted to reiterate what we had talked about in previous lessons. This is a representation of where right here, this would be considered Judea. Right underneath them is the kingdom of Edom or Esau. And as it says here, that's where the Horites used to live. This is this city called Petra. But this is also called Idumea. So this is the area. See, they're right next to their twin brother, because this is all Jacob. All right. And by the way, this is Gaza, which was taken over by the Israelis in 1967, but then given back in 2005. Politically, the United Nations still considers Gaza part of Israel. What's that got to do with where we are today? We have skirted the issue. The next session, we're going to talk about where Edom is today, where the Edomites are today in our next session. And then after that session, Father willing, and actually Father willing if he allows us to do this next session, but Father willing, then we're going to spend at least as much time on the seed of the woman or the seed of Jacob, because that for the Most High's people is the most important thing. But see, part of what's going on with the Most High's people is we don't know who we are. So these lessons are designed to show us from the Bible's perspective who the real people of the Most High are. Because in this day and time, it's going to be the real people of the Most High that all of history is pointing in the direction of. So we absolutely need to know where those people are, where his people are, what his people are to be doing. So when the scriptures say, those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed, it's time for us to parse out what those things mean in 2024. So again, we're going to be spending a lot of time on Jacob as well. So we give thanks to the Father for what he has shown us up to this point. Father, bless you and keep you. Father, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Father, lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.